The War is Over, the Stonehouse Series, Chapter 48. 6 strands of braided leather wrapped themselves around, up and over the well-worn wooden disc before descending into the cave's blackness down below. 2 small but calloused hands gripped the braided leather rope, restricting its rate of descent, protecting the cargo it carried. Practiced fingers eased their burden into a flawless landing of its precious cargo, not spilling a single drop. Words from a woman's voice called out into the empty silence. "Lazarus, your rosehip tea is ready." Lazarus got up, walked over and opened the dumbwaiter door to retrieve his tea, and then stuck his head inside the shaft and said, "Thank you, Esther. Oh, and could you send me some of those biscuits to go with this tea?" "Sure thing, Laz," she replied with her head inside the chute, her voice a muffled echo in her ears. "And some of that honey butter your mom made." "It's all gone, but I could make you some more. Would you please?" Esther looked down the black hole the dumbwaiter would soon come back up through, and she took a moment to consider a thought and said, "Lazarus, where are your sisters?" "Downstairs. They have closed the door to their rooms," he answered into a vertical passageway, "and they're getting ready for this evening's meal. We get to come up and see some daylight." Esther wondered out loud, "What have you been doing?" "The usual. I have some of Simon's scrolls, Psalms, Isaiah. I usually only take 2 or 3 out of the scriptorium at a time. What are you doing?" "Feeding you and talking to you through this chimney." "Just finishing up my chores. I fixed the greens for the evening's meal. Do you want me to send you something more?" "Send me something?" Lazarus considered her words, thinking of something too big to fit into the dumbwaiter, and tried another tactic. No, thank you." He paused a moment, and he said, "However, I would like to show you something, but I can't send it up through this contraption. Simon's orders." "Well, since Simon said," replied Esther through the passageway, "I will be right there." Within 5 minutes, Esther was walking through the wine cellar doorway with a container of honey butter and 2 biscuits in her garden chore shoulder bag. She closed the door behind her. Through years of habit, she stood in absolute silence, looking, but mostly listening, just as a deer would survey an empty meadow for a time before venturing into a vulnerable place. With her left hand, she opened the closet door and stepped inside and pulled that door shut up behind her. Now she was alone inside the wine cellar closet. Esther reached up and released the latch in the top right corner and pulled the back wall of the closet toward her and pushed it to her side. At her feet was black hole darkness, and she leaned forward and looked down the stone chimney. The room below was bathed in candlelight. She reached across the blackness and grabbed an upper rung with her left hand, stepped across the hole onto the ladder, and silently moved into the caves below. "What are you doing?" "I am wisely utilizing every moment here in Simon's library. He has the first-generation copies of several Psalms and parts of Isaiah. But I don't read from those. They are far too precious. I read from the scrolls that he has copied. Excellent work, I must add. I feel the same way about those old scrolls, and I have used up a bunch of candles, reading through the words of David and Moses, and my book, the one named after me. I think it was the other way around, Esther. You were named after the queen who rescued the people of Israel. Think what you want to, Laz, but I have heard Jesus talking, and very soon God is going to be my father, and I am going to be his daughter, and he's going to hang my picture on his heaven castle wall. That's what I'm thinking. I saw her, the real Queen Esther, that is, and her uncle. We talk a lot. Nice people. Is she pretty? Questioned Esther as she tipped her head and batting her eyes, smiling as she asked, Does she look like me? Esther, you said it backwards again, although you do look very much alike. Mama told me that we did, but she said that from the eyes of her heart. Well, I saw her, and I talked to Isaiah and David only 2 weeks ago about what they wrote hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and now I am here reading what they wrote. Doesn't that bend your brain a little? It bends mine. Lazarus, you should have noticed by now that my brain is very flexible. They are just as now as we are now, only they are there and we are here. Mary said Jesus is going to go and get them soon. I think about that instead of what it's going to cost him to go and get them. You told me that you wanted to show me something. What did you find? You talked to Isaiah. What did he say? Did he say more about what he wrote? On the table in front of them was a scroll. One Simon had copied. It was written in extremely sharp penmanship, and it was obvious that Lazarus was guarding it. Any foodstuff he had was on a separate table, and a damp cloth was there to keep his fingers clean. You know what Isaiah wrote? Questioned Lazarus. Esther hesitated. Well, yes, Simon taught us to read just after he bought me and Mama. But I would like you to tell me what Isaiah said and wrote. Responded Lazarus with one eyebrow up. Well, when I talked with Isaiah, he said that when you were to see Jesus in a crowd of people, it would be just like seeing any other man. Well, yes, I can understand that, but I do think that he is rather ruggedly handsome in his own way. Lazarus continued, Isaiah you saw, Israel's first king, as an example. He stood head and shoulders above those around him, and he looked like a king. And, well, Jesus looks like a farmer down the road, or the sandal maker's cousin. And you found where he wrote about that? Where? What did he write? Well, right here. He has no form or comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Lazarus stopped reading, but Esther continued. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrow, and acquainted with grief. Lazarus had shifted his weight in his chair and moved his hands. It was covering what Esther was reading. He looked back over his right shoulder to see where she was looking, and it was at the ceiling. She kept going. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has bore our sicknesses and carried our... Lazarus interrupted Esther. I thought you knew how to read. What are you doing? I'm practicing, answered Esther, turning to look at Lazarus' face. I memorized this part. And then to look in his eyes she added. But that doesn't mean I understand all of what he said. Maybe you could help me. Well, how about we look at this together? And, he added, closely watching her eyes, I will correct you if need be. Well, that's good. She is kindness. We can do this together. Okay, answered Esther, that's good for me. The part I read, informed Lazarus, has happened, and what you said from memory hasn't happened yet. But we're in the middle of it happening. This entire section that Isaiah wrote about is being fulfilled right now this week. We are in the center of all time. Everything, past, present, and future, revolves around this one moment, and we are here, living in it. And we know it, Esther said. It is Jesus who is the center axle, and what he is doing right now is the hub, and everything else is the wheel spinning around it. Then it would be important to hang on to Jesus and not let go. The sound of a clicking latch downstairs caused the two to look towards the circle stairway and the bedrooms down below. The sisters came up the steps with Martha leading the way. Mary was walking behind and examining her work on Martha's hair. One curved, flowing single braid formed from hair as thick as corn silk. Esther exclaimed, Very nice, Martha. Simon will like that for sure. Have you two set a date yet? Lazarus asked. Not yet. Too much going on, too fast. Lazarus responded, I know what you are saying. I'm trying hard not to think about it, but the harder I try not to think of it, the more I do think about it, because I remember what David said when I talked with him, and what Isaiah said, and then I go and read what they wrote, and then I think about that while I try to think of something else. And there is a lot going on. Does that make any sense at all? Esther observed. Well, Laz, I think that we need to get you into the sunshine really quick. Martha agreed. Yes, going upstairs should change our thoughts, at least for a little while. Laz jumped up, offering, I will go first and open all of the doors. And would you come last, Esther, and then close them all? Sure, Laz. Lead away.